Okie dokie. Today, superannuation and pension beneficiary options. So essentially today we're just going to walk through the different options available in a superannuation and a pension account. What beneficiary options you have available to you. So simply put, beneficiary options is the person who will receive the funds in the event of your passing. Okay, so if you pass away, i.e. you die, who's going to receive your funds? Now, there are some different options available for super and pension, so we're going to go through them briefly. So we'll start with super, the easiest. Now, super has two types of nominations available. The first one, the simplest one, is called a non-binding death benefit nomination. Okay, the reason this is the most common slash the most simplest is it is essentially non-binding, i.e. not legally binding. So this is the one that you've probably seen. You can do it online. Say, for example, if you're with Aussie Super or one of the major super funds, you can jump into the app and you can put your partner, your mate, your sister, whoever you want to put. Okay, you can put it quite easily and then just click save. All right. So simply put, this is merely a suggestion to the super fund who to pay it to. Now, why I use the word suggestion is that in the event of your passing, the trustee, i.e. the super fund, will actually have discretion where to pay it to. Okay, it's very unlikely they wouldn't pay it to the person that you've suggested or chosen, but they still do have the ultimate discretion who it is paid to. There may be someone more appropriate, for example. Say, for example, if you nominated, let's just say, your sister or your mate, but you've actually got a wife and two children, okay, and you just hadn't updated it, they may find it more appropriate to send the funds to your wife, as an example. Okay, so again, non-binding death benefit nomination is just a suggestion to the super fund. Now, the other type of nomination that you'll generally find is a binding death benefit nomination. Now, the reason I said generally find is because there's actually two options. There's binding lapsing and binding non-lapsing. Okay, some super funds actually only have binding binding lapsing ones, which means they lapse after a certain period, typically 3 years. So a binding death benefit nomination is stronger than non-binding. Okay, you've probably gathered that pretty easily. But essentially, a binding death benefit nomination is a legally binding document. Okay, so you're nominating someone to receive the benefits of your superannuation fund. Now, there are certain people that you can nominate for a binding death benefit nomination. Unlike the non-binding, which is really a lot more open, people can pretty much nominate anyone, to be honest, and then it's up to the trustee at the end of the day. Binding is a lot more specific in the way that it will tell you exactly who you can nominate. Now, typically the list is quite straightforward, where it's going to be things like spouses, children under the age of 18, financial dependents, someone in an interdependent relationship, so this is someone you have a close personal relationship with, or a legal personal representative. So a legal personal representative is your will. Okay, so if you've got a will, if you've gone ahead and done some good estate planning and you've got a will in place, you can actually nominate your will to receive the funds. Okay, but the really important part here to remember for any nomination is that in Australia, if you have your spouse or a child under the age of 18, these are the two very typical ones. There's some outside of this for special circumstances, but we're just going to focus on this. If you have a spouse or a child under the age of 18 nominated, they will actually receive your benefits tax-free. Anyone outside of this will actually potentially pay up to 17% tax, or more in some cases. Now, this is because the spouse and child under the age of 18, or children, are considered tax dependents. Okay, it's a really important thing to consider when you are actually doing your nominations, because sometimes you may select, let's say you might select your spouse and then you might select your brother and sister just because you want them to have some of the funds. But without thinking through it clearly, you may be sending money to people who actually, unfortunately, do have to pay tax on it. Whereas some people might select their spouse and then tell their spouse, hey, if you don't mind, if I do pass away, I'd like you to do X, Y, Z with my funds. Okay. Now, with relation to these two types of nominations, the non-binding and the binding, this is available within superannuation. Now, when we take the next step of our life, okay, when we're retired or when we're getting pretty close to it, there'll be the option of a pension account, also referred to as account-based pensions. Okay, each super fund will have a different word for it or a different name for it depending on their product, but typically they'll all refer back to being called a pension or an account-based pension. Okay. Now, a pension or an account-based pension has the same options again. It's got non-binding, binding lapsing, and binding non-lapsing in most cases. However, there's another option now that becomes available, and that is called a reversionary pension. Okay, so a reversionary pension is quite simple in nature. Essentially, in the event of your passing, now let's quickly pause it here and take a step back. Pension accounts, very importantly, are accounts that once you're over the age of 60 in Australia and you've met a condition of release, you're actually able to convert your super into an account-based pension or a pension account. Now, a pension account is a tax-free environment currently that you can have up to $1.9 million in, okay? And that is where you can begin to draw funds on a regular basis to receive your income as a pensioner, okay? This is not the age pension from the government or anything like that. This is your own superannuation funds. Now, when you set this account up, there will be the option of a reversionary death benefit nomination. And essentially, this additional option allows you to nominate someone where the funds, in the event of your passing, will essentially revert to that person, but remain within the pension phase. Okay, let's break that down. So let's say John, okay, we're going to break this down and do an example for each one. Let's say John, he's 55 and he has a super account, all right? And he's nominated his missus, his spouse, to receive the funds of his superannuation in the event he passes away. Now, if he does a binding or non-binding nomination, essentially when he passes away, the funds will be sent to his wife directly. Okay, they actually come out of the superannuation realm, all right? So it comes out of super and gets paid to her, okay? With a reversionary pension, let's say now John's turned 62, he's retired and he's decided to open up a pension account and he's nominated his wife as his reversionary pension, his reversionary nomination. Now what happens if he passes away, effectively his pension account essentially reverts to his wife's name. So nothing changes. So essentially, she'll receive the account. It'll be in her name. She'll have all control over the account, but she'll continue to receive the nominated payments whenever they come out. Let's say fortnightly or monthly. Nothing changes. It's a very smooth transition, and then she, at her leisure, can do what she wants with the account. Okay. So it is it's probably the easiest one for a lot of people to utilize because there's no sort of break in between if something happens to John in this example. You don't have to wait for death certificates to be sent to the fund or anything along these lines. I shouldn't say that because you do have to send these things in, but more importantly, you're not waiting for the funds to actually be sent to the wife in this case. It just reverts to her name and everything continues. It's essentially the easiest way to continue everything that has been set up in the first place. Now, these are all the typical nominations that are available. Keep in mind, during this video, you might have been thinking about things like wills. You know, what if someone has a will in place? Like I said before, those non-binding and binding nominations, you can actually nominate your will, your estate, okay? And that's typically shown as when you're on the phone, on the form, it will say legal personal representative. That's what the will or the estate is, okay? That means that your money will be paid to your estate and then be divided as per your wishes, okay? So very straightforward. 3 different types within pension, and then there's the 2 main ones that are within super. Now, each super fund will have their own forms and all these sort of things. So if you have a super fund and you don't think you set this up, it's really important because if you haven't set anything up, essentially the super fund doesn't know what to do with your money in the event you pass away, okay? And whilst it's a morbid thought to have, unfortunately things can happen to people. So it's always a good thing to check on. All right, well, thanks for watching the video. A really fast one, just wanted to go through the basics. We're going to go through each of these in more detail in another video, but here are just the real basics.